Book title: Dusty Ridge, A Gunslinger's Journey. Chapter 1, Dusty Ridge. In the rugged town of Dusty Ridge, a fading sun cast long shadows over the somber faces of its inhabitants. Among them stood Wyatt Murphy, a gunslinger haunted by a dark past. His heart, once filled with ambition and courage, now burdened with remorse and the weight of sins committed. As the breeze whispered through the dusty streets, Wyatt's weary eyes gazed upon the abandoned church steeple. It had been years since he had last sought solace in the arms of faith. The memories of his violent past seemed to suffocate any hope of redemption. The townsfolk, distrustful and wary of Wyatt, watched him from the corners of their eyes. They knew all too well the stories that flowed through the saloons and withered old man's tales. Wyatt had been a notorious gunslinger, feared throughout the West for his ruthless demeanor and unmatched aim. But as the days turned to dusk and the skies took on shades of crimson, something stirred within Wyatt's restless soul. A voice, soft and gentle, beckoned him towards the church. Pushing open the creaking doors, he was met with a hollowed silence that filled the sanctuary. Wyatt's eyes fell upon the stained glass windows as he stepped into its beckoning hall. Golden rays of sunlight that pierced through the colored panes, casting a hopeful glow upon his hardened face. With each step, he felt a growing sense of grace that had eluded him for far too long. With a low, whispered voice, Wyatt's heart spoke out. God, if you're there, how can I atone for the lives I've taken? How can I find forgiveness and make amends for all the grief I have caused in this world? As Wyatt sat there, desperation coloring every word as it trailed out of his mouth, Wyatt's heart sank even lower as he felt only now the hollowness of his own soul in the empty sanctuary. Chapter 2, Shadows of the Past. The sun hung high in the cloudless sky, casting a scorching heat across the wild and lawless frontier. Dust devils twirled through the barren streets of a once promising town, now reduced to a mere shell of its former glory. This was the kind of place Wyatt Murphy gravitated towards, a place where the line between right and wrong blurred into a hazy gray. Wyatt Murphy was renowned as a deadly gunslinger, feared by both outlaws and lawmen alike. His reputation preceded him wherever he went, but few knew the truth that lay beneath his rugged exterior, a tormented soul yearning for redemption. It was his dark past as a bank robber that haunted him, a past that he desperately sought to bury deep within his being. As Wyatt entered the derelict saloon, the stale smell of whiskey and defeat enveloped him. The few remaining patrons glanced up from their mugs, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. Wyatt's weathered boots echoed against the wooden floorboards as he strode to the bar, his gun holstered at his side, a constant reminder of the life he was trying to leave behind. The barkeep, a grizzled old man named Ezra, looked up from wiping a dirty mug as Wyatt approached. The lines etched on his face told stories of both hardship and resilience, much like Wyatt himself. Ezra squinted his eyes, recognizing the presence of a familiar face. "Well, if it ain't Wyatt Murphy," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of wariness and recognition. Wyatt nodded in acknowledgement. "Ezra, good to see you're still running this hole in the ground. Can't say the same for some others I used to know." The corner of Ezra's mouth twitched, a faint smile almost forming. "Ah, you mean the likes of old Curtis and his gang? Word around here is they met their end in a haul of bullets, courtesy of you." Wyatt's eyes flickered briefly, a distant memory resurfacing. "Yeah, it wasn't my proudest moment, but we all make choices that can't be undone, and they surely made theirs." Ezra leaned in closer, his eyes surveying Wyatt with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "I reckon you got more demons than a rattlesnake has rattles, Wyatt. What brings a man like you to a forsaken place like this?" Wyatt's gaze grew distant, as he stared into his drink, musing on the question. I came here to escape my past, Ezra, to find some semblance of peace, but the past has a way of catching up to a man, no matter how far he ventures. Ezra's weathered hand gripped the dirty rag tightly. You think redemption is possible for someone like you? Wyatt's jaw tensed, his voice filled with a hint of determination. I don't rightly know, Ezra, but I reckon I won't stop trying till I find out. Suddenly, the saloon door swung open with a loud creak, drawing the attention of everyone inside. A tall figure stood in the doorway, the sun casting a long shadow behind him. His eyes locked onto Wyatt's, and a sinister smile crept across his face. Wyatt's heart skipped a beat as he recognized the man. Marcus Kane, a former partner in crime who had double-crossed him years ago, leaving him for dead. The scars from that betrayal still etched deep in Wyatt's soul. With a measured calm, Wyatt stood up from his stool, the weight of his past settling heavily upon his shoulders. Looks like my past has finally caught up to me, Ezra. Ezra watched as Wyatt walked towards the door, his hand hovering near his gun. You best be careful, Wyatt. Redemption is a long and treacherous road, but sometimes a man's past can be the key to his salvation. Wyatt nodded once back at Ezra, his eyes filled with a mix of determination and resignation. I reckon you're right, old friend. Moving his hand away from his holster, Wyatt's eyes giving way to Marcus Kane as he stepped into the sunlight, leaving that part of his past behind him. Chapter 3, The Ministering Hand. Wyatt sat on the dusty wooden porch of the small saloon in the town of Dusty Ridge, watching as the sun began its descent behind the rugged mountains. The day had been long and weary, filled with the usual chaos of lawlessness that plagued the Old West. As he took a sip from his whiskey, he couldn't help but ponder over the strange twist of fate that seemed to guide his life. Lost in his thoughts, Wyatt was unaware of the presence approaching him until a soft voice spoke. Excuse me, sir, may I join you? The voice belonged to an elderly man dressed in a modest black suit, his gray hair neatly combed back. Wyatt looked up and met the minister's gentle gaze. Sure, have a seat, he replied, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. The minister gratefully settled into the chair and extended a hand. I'm Reverend Jacob Collins, he introduced himself. Wyatt took the minister's hand, giving it a firm shake. Wyatt, he responded, his voice laced with a hint of weariness. It had been a while since he had engaged in a conversation that didn't involve gunslinging or shifty characters. I couldn't help but overhear your name Foley, Reverend Collins said, his eyes lighting up with curiosity. Are you by any chance the same Wyatt Adams Murphy who once owned the Murphy Adams Ranch down in Texas? Wyatt raised an eyebrow, surprised by the Reverend's knowledge. That's me, he confirmed, but the ranch has been long gone, burned down to ashes by a fire that consumed more than just the buildings. Reverend Collins nodded sympathetically. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Murphy. Life has its way of testing us, doesn't it? His voice carried a soothing tone, the kind that would calm even the most restless of souls. Wyatt leaned back in his chair, the cool evening breeze rustling through his unruly hair. Why are you out here, Reverend? Seems like an odd place for a man of the cloth. The minister smiled, his eyes filled with the fire that belied his old age. I believe that God calls upon us to spread his word, even in the darkest corners of the world. This land may be harsh and unforgiving, but it is the souls of its people that need saving the most. Wyatt scoffed, taking another sip of his whiskey. So you're here to save the sinners, huh? Good luck with that. Most folks around here would shoot you on sight if they heard a word about God. Reverend Collins leaned forward, the passion in his voice evident. That's precisely why I'm here, Mr. Murphy. These people have lost faith, lost hope. It is my duty to remind them that there is still goodness in the world, even amidst the chaos. Wyatt studied the minister, recognizing a glimmer of determination in his eyes. He couldn't help but feel a strange sense of respect for the man's unwavering dedication. "Look, Reverend," Wyatt spoke hesitantly, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "I ain't much of a religious man myself, but I guess I could lend a hand if you need it. Just don't expect any sermons to come out of my mouth." The minister's face lit up with gratitude. "Mr. Murphy, your assistance would be greatly appreciated, if that time ever comes." Wyatt contemplated the minister's words. Maybe, just maybe, there was more left in this life than just aimless wandering and aimless gunfights. But for now, all Wyatt was certain of was the creeping of the cold night air and his train ride north, going anywhere but there. Chapter 4, The Unexpected Savior. As the thunderous engine roared, the train barreled through the night, cutting through the cold, dark landscape. Inside one of the compartments, a group of innocent orphans slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos about to unfold. Little did they know this faithful train ride would forever alter their lives. The notorious bandit, Black-Eyed Devin, had devised an elaborate plan to rob the train of its valuable cargo. With his gang of ruthless outlaws, they strategically positioned themselves throughout the train, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Meanwhile, at the far end of the train, Wyatt, sensing some trouble brewing, began to walk through the train's carriages, working his way up towards the front, where he knew the group of young orphans had taken to sleep. When a chance encounter with one of Devin's gang members had put him on high alert, Wyatt checked his ammo sleeve and continued to work his way up. Suddenly, chaos erupted aboard the train. Outlaws stormed the carriages, brandishing their weapons and shouting orders. Passengers screamed as they were forced to hand over their valuables, but Wyatt was not one to sit idly by. Swiftly, he equipped himself with a rope and a small assortment of gadgets. Silently, he began maneuvering through the rest of the carriages, using his incredible agility and stealth to avoid detection. Wyatt's dark green eyes gleamed with determination as he made his way towards the front of the train, where the orphans lay fast asleep, completely vulnerable. Reaching the orphans' compartment, Wyatt peered inside. The sight of their innocent faces roused something deep within him. He knew he had to protect them at all costs. Suddenly, the door to the compartment swung open, revealing an imposing figure. It was Devin, his eyes cold and calculating. Well, ain't you a persistent one?" he sneered. Recognizing Black-Eyed Devin and knowing his thirst for blood, Wyatt's heart began to race for the lives of the unsuspecting children. "Leave the children alone, Devin," Wyatt said firmly, his voice filled with conviction. Amused, Devin chuckled menacingly. "You think you can stop me? Try." Wyatt's voice contorted into a determined scowl. "You underestimate me at your own peril." As Wyatt and Devin prepared to square off, a sudden jolt coursed through the train, throwing them off balance. The trembling of the carriages grew increasingly intense. Panic enveloped the train as the driver struggled to regain control. Wyatt seized the opportunity. With lightning speed, he leaped into action, effortlessly incapacitating Devin's gang members who were distracted by the chaotic commotion. Taking advantage of the pandemonium, Wyatt grabbed the children one by one and rushed them to safety. As the train screeched to a halt, Wyatt knew their escape was near. With the orphans gathered around him, he looked into their frightened eyes and smiled reassuringly. "Everything will be okay now. You're safe, you hear?" Just then, the authorities, alerted by the commotion, arrived to apprehend the startled outlaws. Wyatt's actions had not gone unnoticed. His daring rescue of the orphaned children earned him the gratitude of law enforcement. They recognized his skills and offered him a chance to join their ranks, to use his talents for the greater good. Wyatt pondered the offer for a moment, reflecting back on the words of the minister back in Dusty Ridge. With determination to find his way back in life, he focused his attention back to the orphans. Wyatt knew where he belonged, and he was hard set to get there. Chapter 5, A Battle Within. Haunted still by his violent past and the increasing demands of his new role as the orphan's protector, Wyatt finds himself grappling with his faith and purpose. The mid-morning sun painted the sky with vibrant hues of orange and pink, casting a warm glow over the small orphanage in Roseville, where Wyatt had made his way to. As the orphans scampered about to the courtyard, their laughter pierced the air, reminding Wyatt of the innocence he once had. Walking through the halls, Wyatt's mind was plagued by haunting memories of his years as a mercenary. The endless violence, the shattered lives, and the irreparable damage he had caused weighed heavy on his conscience. He had sought redemption in the embrace of these orphans, hoping to find solace and purpose in protecting those who were too young to fend for themselves. Reaching the small chapel, Wyatt pushed open the creaky wooden door, the smell of incense and old hymnals filling his nostrils. He knelt before the altar, his calloused hands gripping the back of what once was an old pew in front of him, his head bowed low. "God, if you're there," Wyatt whispered, his voice filled with emotion. "I don't know if I'm worthy of the role I've taken on. God, how can I protect these innocent children the right way when violence has been my only companion for so long?" Silence enveloped the chapel, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for an answer. Wyatt felt an overwhelming unease, a sense of loneliness, despite the children's laughter echoing from outside. Suddenly, a soft voice pierced the solitude. "Wyatt, my son," it said, resonating deep within his soul. Startled, Wyatt lifted his head, searching for the source of the voice. His eyes fell upon a figure standing in the dimly lit corner of the chapel. It was Reverend Jacob Collins. "Reverend Collins," Wyatt exclaimed, relief washing over him, surprised to see a familiar face from the old dusty bowl. "You seem to pop up everywhere." Reverend Collins nodded his head. "It's my hometown. Settled here right after passing through Dusty Ridge." Wyatt remembered that day, whiskey in his hand and the familiar face now standing in front of him. "The Roseville Orphanage is under my patronage." Wyatt's eyes revealing a sparkle and a hint of joy hearing this news. "God sure does work in mysterious ways, Reverend." Wyatt's response was one of awe and wonderment, his mind replaying all the events that brought him to this small, growing town called Roseville, and how quickly they came to pass after meeting the Reverend back in Dusty Ridge. "You know, Reverend, I've been struggling with my purpose here. Can I truly protect these children despite the darkness that resides within me?" Reverend Jacob Collins approached, his gentle smile inviting trust and understanding. "We all carry our own demons, Wyatt. It's through the acknowledgement of our flaws, our past mistakes, that we find the strength to overcome them." A wave of gratitude washed over Wyatt as Reverend Collins' words resonated within him. "But how?" he asked, his voice laden in desperation. "How do I free myself from the grill of my own violent, lost past?" Reverend Collins laid a comforting hand on Wyatt's shoulder. "Through forgiveness, my son. Forgiveness of oneself and seeking redemption for one's actions. It is a long and difficult journey, but one that is necessary for you to find peace within yourself." Wyatt nodded slowly, the weight of his burdens lightening ever so lightly. "Reverend, I'm tired of fighting against my own inner demons. I want to be worthy of protecting these children without the constant fear that I will fail them." Reverend Collins' eyes shimmered with understanding. "Keep your faith strong, Wyatt. God has chosen you for a reason, and he will guide you through the darkest of times. Remember, it is in our struggles that we find our true purpose." Taking a deep breath, Wyatt felt a flicker of hope ignite within him. The path ahead would not be easy, but armed with Reverend Collins' guidance and the unwavering trust of the orphaned children, he would face his fears head on. As Wyatt and Reverend Collins stood together in the chapel, the sounds of joyous laughter drifted in through the open door. Wyatt gazed out at the children, his heart swelling with determination. He may still carry his violent past, but he would use it as a catalyst for change, breaking the cycle of violence and ensuring the orphan's safety. And in time, Wyatt knew with a resounding confidence built out of his faith that one day the children would lift him up out of it. A surge of gratitude washed over Wyatt just then. The genuine care he felt from Reverend Collins and the rest of the Roseville community was overwhelming. He was no longer the outsider, the man burdened by his past. In Roseville, he was given a chance to rewrite his story. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the town, Wyatt marveled at the beauty of his new beginning. He knew he still had a long road ahead, but with the support and acceptance he found at Roseville, he was determined to rise above his past and embrace a future filled with hope and redemption. The quiet murmurs of appreciation from the orphans who had gathered around him reminded him of the profound purpose that fueled his transformation. With each passing day, Wyatt had witnessed acts of unconditional love that shattered his hardened heart. The orphans, who had endured unimaginable pain and loss, had emerged as an unwavering force of resilience. It was through their optimistic spirit that Wyatt had found redemption and discovered his ability to become their devoted guardian, and for himself the ability to live again. The End. A book written by Jules Mahalo. That's me. All for the glory of one. Father. November 1st, 2023. Thank you for listening and subscribing to my channel. Jules.